Jamie Marks' Dead is a title that just doesn't mess around. But it's also the story of a kid whose name you know before you even watch the movie, and whose outcome you also know as well, due to the fact that he gets bullied every time he goes to school, until one day they end up finding his body near a creek. Now the interesting thing about this movie is that it looked very intriguing, but to me, I also thought that it was going to be an adaptation of the body of Christopher Creed, because it felt a lot like that. That was my favorite book way back in freshman year, but it's actually not the adaptation of this book, but another book named One for Sorrow, and where the actual main characters, or the main character being a guy named Adam, who is in the same grade, I believe, as Jamie Marks, and he ends up befriending Gracie, who is a girl who finds his body near the creek, and they become friends until one day he's over at her house, they're chilling, they're getting it on, until they look out the window and they notice that Jamie Marks' body is there. Now at first Gracie looks at it and goes, you know what, don't even deal with that, but at the same time Adam is looking at it and going, you know what, I find this pretty interesting, and he decides to go out and do something about it, which then ends up becoming what we see in the movie. Now for starters, the movie does have some really great elements, the main one being the cinematography. The way that this movie looks is just phenomenal. It has that dread that like Prisoners had, but it having an even more eerie feeling, and having just this whole town seem pretty much dead, and it has these scenarios or these scenes where like the kid's walking home and there's like a dead deer just hanging from his basketball hoop thing, and it's just like, it is really messed up. The makeup is also really phenomenal, and if it wasn't for the fact that Jamie Marks looked like Harry Potter, I would have been scared the whole time that I watched the movie. I mean, I started watching it at night, and when Jamie Marks pops up, I close the computer and I finish watching it in the morning. But the other elements that the movie definitely gets right is the acting, because for the most part these kids do a really good job in this movie, and it's very interesting to actually see actors who are the same age as their characters actually be in a film. But the other thing is that these kids actually come from a really strong TV background as well. It's ironic that they do a better job than the actual adult characters, but granted they don't have much to work with because they're pretty minor roles with what Liv Tyler and Judy Greer have. But when the movie's actually hitting you with the subject matter that it's trying to give you, which is the whole aspect about bullying, when you see those scenes when Jamie Marks is getting bullied, it's like, dang, that is crazy. It's like one of those scenarios or one of those videos that you find on Facebook and you watch and you're like, that's so messed up, they need to find these people and just like send them to Guantanamo Bay. There's also a scene earlier on in the movie which was one of my favorite scenes, in where they're all in a classroom and the teacher's just passing out stuff and everyone's acting or not really bringing up what has happened when they find out that Jamie Marks is dead. But one of the girls is like, are we not going to talk about it? The teacher has this very minor performance, but what he says is really strong, and where he tells them, can you say anything about Jamie? Can any of you say anything? And obviously nobody knew him, so he goes, if none of you knew him or try to interact with him when he was alive, why try to bring it up now that he's dead? And I was like, damn! And it was those moments earlier on in the movie that I thought really were impactful. However, the movie at a certain point, if you're expecting it to go a specific route, it doesn't necessarily go that way. It goes a different way, to the point that I think it feels a little bit like Donnie Darko. It has that essence. It's not, you know, there with Donnie Darko, but it has that essence of feeling like Donnie Darko mixed in with Let Me In, or for you cinephiles, Let the Right One In. And where this relationship that these two characters have, the alive one and the dead one, isn't so much about finding who actually killed them, which may bum out a lot of people, and I was hoping that that would be one of the biggest things, finding out who did this to him, but it's more about them building each other up, and where they're both in a limbo, one of them actually being the dead limbo that we know, but the other one being in a real life limbo, and where he just feels dead in real life. What the movie ends up reminding me of, it is not necessarily to put it down, but it does have that Twilight-esque relationship thing going on, and where it's a person who's alive and a person who's dead, and they're trying to bond together. What I'm saying is this one does it better, doesn't master it, but that's technically what they're going for, how they're trying to, you know, look at this relationship and how it's dealing with. So if it's a movie that you were hoping for to be like a horror film or a revenge film or something like that, it doesn't go that route. It goes this relationship type route, and where these two characters are trying to, I guess in a sense, find themselves, and where one of them is pretty much alone in the real world, while the other one just was never able to cross over because they never had love. What it ends up coming down to is that if you're dealing with relationships between these two characters, it's all about the interactions. Now, of course, the way that they end up coming together, that's where it sort of loses it for me, because I wasn't expecting for them to go face to face and then him be like, you know, just dashing out as we've seen before, but I also wasn't expecting him to be like, hey, you're dead. Hey, what's up, Jamie? And it's just like, what? I mean, they end up coming together, and then they have this whole talk where Jamie's looking at him, and he's like, hey, you should definitely take off your clothes. My clothes? Yeah, you should take it off, and, you know, like, just take it all off, and then just sit there in the place where they found my body, so then they find you in the morning, and then they think you're creepy. Oh, okay. And I'm like, that's not a talk you have with a dead person. There's also a scenario that happens in where they interact with one of Jamie Marks' dead buddies, I guess. It was this girl who continues to kill her parents, and she's also dead as well. And the character of Adam does something to her character, so then she goes after him. And technically, a dead person who's still around and is coming back to get you, that is a haunting. That's sort of like a horror film there in and of itself. What this movie does is it doesn't become spooky or this spirit trying to haunt this guy. What it ends up becoming is like an ex-girlfriend trying to seek revenge, and where she like walks over and she's like, "You did this to me," starts chasing him around the house. You would think that since she's a ghost and the fact that she was able to appear here, that she would be able to walk through the walls. She can't even go through the door. She has to like break down the door in order to get there. One of the main things that I haven't talked about yet, but that's this underlying scenario, sort of subtext that's there, and that's the sort of, I guess the best way to call it is the homoerotic type thing that's going on. And it isn't technically the biggest thing in the movie, but when you have shots like this, it's, going to be brought up, and especially when you search up this movie, some places actually have it marked down as being such. But the director doesn't necessarily put it out there, but it is definitely there, so I mean, there's that. It doesn't necessarily touch upon it anymore. But again, while I'll say that the second half of the movie is where it sort of lost it for me because they start going the relationship route, which is fine, but at the same time, the interactions that they had just weren't the most engaging, at least for me. The actors do a great job. The cinematography is so beautiful, and the director definitely does a really good job with the material that he has. Again, if the story ended up being the body of Christopher Creed, this would definitely be the director that I would want to do it. But other than that, I'm curious if you were able to check out this movie, what you thought about it. If you thought that the beginning was really good and then the way that the story ended up going sort of lost it for you the same way that it did for me, or if you were engaged the whole time, or if you just didn't like it. We can talk about it down below in the comments, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.